You know that feeling, right? You're talking to someone who's clearly smart, brilliant even, but they're latched onto an idea that is just obviously wrong. It's so frustrating. Well, today we're going to unpack that exact thinking pattern, the one that can make even the sharpest people seem, well, kind of stupid. So let's just ask it straight up. Why does this happen? Why do really intelligent people get so completely stuck on bad ideas? You've seen it, I've seen it. It feels like they've hit a mental brick wall. So let's figure out what that wall is actually made of. Okay, first things first, to really get to the bottom of this, we have to totally rethink what we mean when we use a word like stupid. Because the real issue here has almost nothing to do with actual intelligence, and this quote right here is the key to the whole thing. It's not about how many books you've read or what your IQ score is. It's about a specific, predictable pattern of thinking, a kind of mental programming that can trip up anyone, even the best of us. Okay, let's dive into this. The myth, the thing we all tend to assume, is that stubbornly holding a bad idea is a sign of low intelligence. But the reality? Nope. It's about a rigid thinking pattern. Think of it like this. Your brain's hardware is top of the line, super fast processor, but the software it's running has a glitch, a program that's frozen and just refuses to update. So, if it's not about being smart or not, what do we actually call this mental glitch? Well, it has a name, and this is the real culprit we need to get to know. And here it is, cognitive rigidity. It's pretty much what it sounds like, the inability to be mentally flexible. It's when your brain can't adapt or change its beliefs, even when you're staring new, contradictory facts right in the face. The best analogy? Your mind is like a GPS. A flexible mind sees a roadblock and says, okay, recalculating. A rigid mind just keeps screaming, proceed to the route as you drive straight into a wall. So how do you spot this cognitive rigidity? How can you see it in other people? Or, and this is the really tricky part, how do you see it in yourself? Well, it turns out there are three huge red flags to look out for. This whole pattern really plays out in three acts. It kicks off with this feeling of absolute, unshakable certainty. Then it goes into defense mode, fighting off any and all new evidence. And finally, when that rigid idea fails, it protects itself by pointing the finger at everyone and everything else. So let's start with Act 1, that feeling of being 100% right. All right, so the very first sign, the first warning bell, is an almost shocking level of self-assurance. And here's the real giveaway. This extreme certainty almost always pops up when talking about incredibly complex topics. You know, things like the global economy or politics or human psychology. These are subjects that are just full of nuance and gray areas. But a person stuck in cognitive rigidity talks about them like they're simple addition, black and white, no room for doubt. So they're completely certain. But what happens when you try to introduce a new idea? Well, that brings us right to sign number 2, and this is where the walls go up. And this is that brick wall we were talking about. When someone with this thinking pattern is shown credible new evidence that contradicts their belief, they don't go, oh, interesting, tell me more. No, they ignore it, they call it fake news, or they attack the person who brought it up. Their belief has become a fortress, and any new fact is treated like an enemy at the gate. Which brings us to our third and final sign, the ultimate defense mechanism for that fortress. So what happens when their rigid belief leads to an obvious failure? They don't take a step back and think, maybe my approach was wrong. Instead, it is always, always someone else's fault. The system was biased, their boss is an idiot, the market was rigged, you name it. It's a way to protect the core belief, because if you blame the outside world, you never, ever have to question your own rigid thinking. Okay, so we can define cognitive rigidity, we can spot its three main signs, but so what? Why does this really matter? Well, because understanding this isn't just some neat psychological trick, it's a genuinely practical tool you can use every single day. This is the real payoff. Knowing about this pattern is like getting a new tool for your brain. First, it gives you the power of self-awareness, so you can stop and ask, wait a minute, am I the one being rigid right now? It also gives you a tool for empathy. When you're in one of those arguments, you can go from thinking this person is so stubborn to, I see the mental fortress they're defending. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but it totally changes the conversation from a fight to an attempt to understand. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Now that you have this framework, where do you see these patterns playing out? Maybe on the news, maybe at work, or maybe, just maybe, in the mirror. Simply being able to spot it is the first giant leap. Because true intelligence, it turns out, isn't about always being right. It's about having the strength and flexibility to change your mind.